The Louis Burke Frumkes Center for Writing and Culture at Hunter College presents 10 years of best-selling authors and great thinkers. Each week we broadcast new videos from our 10-year speaker archive online for free at our website. We look forward to seeing you again when it's safe. Please enjoy this presentation from the archives of the Louis Burke Frumkes Center for Writing and Culture at Hunter College.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted you're all here once again, and I hope you're coming on the 11th to hear Ned Block, who is the world's expert on consciousness, and he can tell in an instant whether you're conscious. In any event, no, he's truly an interesting speaker. I know him a long time. But tonight we have the irrepressible Patricia Volk. How I came to call Patricia Volk Euglena, and she calls me Woola, is a tale for another time. But suffice that when I was writing a humor column for Penthouse magazine a million years ago, and could invite a guest writer every other month, I invited the funniest people I knew at the time, such as Phyllis Diller, Dan Greenberg, Tony Hendra, and Patty Volk. I did this because Patty was far and away the funniest, serious writer I knew at the time, and everything else I knew about her I learned subsequently from her memoirs, Stuffed and Shocked, which is what I suggest you do. They will make you laugh and cry. They are wonderful, and they are here in the back of the room for her to inscribe for you. Forget that Patty won a Guggenheim Fellowship, or that she attended Columbia University, Bennington College, and NYU, or that she has written for the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Playboy, etc., and yes, even for Penthouse. Just know that she is one of the funniest and most talented writers around. That goes for fiction or nonfiction. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my good friend, Patty Volk.
And Louis is one of the funniest men I know. I don't know if any of you, he definitely wrote the book with the funniest title, How to Increase Your IQ by Eating Gifted Children. And he was very funny tonight when he called me up and he said, "Are you getting ready to speak at Hunter?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be there in a half hour." And he said, "It's next Tuesday." Thanks, Willa. Let's see. How do I get an image up there? It's not working? Okay. Well, I'm just going to start talking and we'll see what happens. Oh, okay, it's one back from that. Oh, okay. That's a bottle of shocking perfume. It's the perfume my mother wore. And if I wanted to be with her, if I wanted to spend time with her, I would, what? Oh, I'm sorry. If I wanted to spend time with my mother, I could have uninterrupted time with her while she put her makeup on. And the very last thing she did, and she had an elaborate maquillage, was to take the gold dauber out of her shocking perfume, and if it was during the day, she'd put it behind her ears, and if it was night, she'd hit all her pulse points. She'd do behind her ears, her wrists, behind her knees, and if she was wearing a low-cut gown, right here. And I thought that bottle was the most precious thing our family owned, because every year on her birthday, my father would come home from work and wake my sister and I up. He was a restaurant man, so he got home very late for the presentation of her birthday present. And it was a bottle of shocking, and he made the wrapping paper himself out of as many $100 bills as it took to get the job done. So I thought that this bottle and Elsa Schiaparelli I thought it was the most valuable thing we had. My mother told me that it had 20 parts that were made in 3 different countries, and it took 30 people to put it together. And in the book, there are shout-outs about what those things are, but the glass flowers were all different, and they were made in Murano by hand. And the dome that went over it was made in Czechoslovakia, and the bottle was a Baccarat bottle made in Paris. And designed by the artist Leonor Fini. A perfect, I hadn't thought of Elsa Schiaparelli much, but a perfect storm kind of arose, which is how books happen. You start, one thing happens and another thing happens, and then suddenly you can't think of anything else. Eudora Welty said that when you're working on a book, everything that happens in your life filters into it. But what happened was in 2003, the Philadelphia Museum of Art had a Schiaparelli retrospective. Schiaparelli had given them about 60 garments in 1964, and they had a show devoted to Schiaparelli, and this is the gorgeous book from it. That's a photograph of Schiaparelli when she was 44. It was heavily retouched. She always had her photos retouched, and I'll get to that later. But it was taken by George Hunigan Huna, who when he moved to Paris became Hunigen Hunet. But let's see. So there was the book. Then there was the fact that my mother was getting very sick, and I knew that I wasn't going to have her much longer. And I also knew that she had a bottle of Shocking in her guest bathroom, this bottle. And I asked her if I could have it. And she didn't like to be asked for things, even though she was very generous. But she said I could have it. And I went into a guest room, and I undid the top, and I took a breath. And it was like everything came rushing back. It was my Madeleine. And that was the second thing that happened. And the third thing that happened was I had just learned about eBay. And so I typed in Schiaparelli. And there was the book that I had read when I was a little girl. It was a book my mother got at Wamrath's, which was a chain of bookstores where you could rent a book. She would not go to the St. Agnes branch of the public library, even though that was our library, because she did not think Amsterdam Avenue was suitable. And she didn't like Columbus Avenue either, and she thought the east side of Broadway was much better than the west side of Broadway. So this is a map of Manhattan without the streets, the Upper West Side without the streets that my mother did not approve of. My mother had opinions on a lot of things, and I got the map maker, John Tornak, to make me that map because, and it killed him to do it because he's very precise, but he's a good friend, so he did it. So those were the three things that happened. I had read Schiaparelli's, on eBay I found the book that I had read when I was 10. It was Elsa Schiaparelli's memoir called Shocking Life. And when I closed the book, my life was different. I started to question my mother. Schiaparelli did things my mother would not approve of. And yet she was very much like me. She had terrible trouble in school. She had something called dyscalculia, which meant numbers were like an alien language to her. She loved to be by herself. She loved to write in her diary. She loved to hatch plots. She had a beautiful older sister who did very well in school. So there was a lot of similarity between me and Schiaparelli. My mother was very, very beautiful. She was known as the most beautiful woman in the world. But I didn't think that after reading Schiaparelli's book, I didn't think that that was going to be something I wanted to try for. I had a grandmother. This is her, Ethel Volk. And this is her at 17 when she was the first calendar girl in the First Bank of Princeton on Nassau Street. And she was once received a letter that was written, "Postman, postman, do your duty, deliver this letter to the Princeton beauty." And it got to her. But of course, by the time I knew her, she didn't look anything like this. So I knew beauty was evanescent, and I wanted to earn whatever I was good at. I didn't want it to be something I was born with from good luck. So I was said to look like my father, and I thought he was handsome. And I wasn't really very unappealing. I had nice hair, and people said my eyes were nice. But I did have a problem that made it very difficult. And that was my lips. My lips were considered bad by everyone in the family. And I was given lip exercises to do by the dentist to give them more rhythm. I don't know if it worked. But 10 times a day I had to tuck them in. which gave my mother permission to like come around and say, "Are you doing your lip exercises?" Very annoying. But Elsa Schiaparelli and my mother had a lot in common, so that realizing I could be like her wasn't jumping off a cliff. They were both clothes horses. My mother had 22 hangers in her closet, and every time she bought something new, she gave something away. She dressed the entire family. She dressed her mother's sisters who didn't have a lot of money. She dressed our housekeeper. She dressed up my aunts. And here's my sister and I and my mother. My sister's in a Jeffrey Bean. My mother had three Bs, Bean, Blass, and, well, I can't think of the other one. And I'm in one of her knit suits, one of her Italian knit suits. But she dressed all of us, even though my sister was 5'9", I was 5'7", and my mother was 5'5". We made it work. Her clothes were that lovely. Elsa Schiaparelli also had an eye for beauty, and they were both superstitious. That was the thing. My mother believed that you should never put a hat on a bed. All openings to pillowcases had to go away from the door so no evil spirits could get in. And Elsa Schiaparelli was very superstitious. She did not allow lilacs in her house. All of her perfumes had to start with the letter S. This is Soleil, a collaboration with Salvador Dali. There was one recently on the internet for $25,000. It was made after the war. Dali made the birds the features of the sun god. Here's another S perfume. This is Snuff, the first perfume for men. And it was a bit of an homage to Marguerite, Ceci n'est pas une pipe. And here's Sleeping, a perfume for women to wear when they went to bed. That was supposed to be very seductive, and it was done like a night candlestick with a cover. I was very, very confused. Elsa Schiaparelli was immodest. She was different than my mother in that she was not afraid to wear anything, and she showed off her body. But my mother was very modest, and I was confused as a young girl because my grandmother had a Cappa di Monte lamp. And as you can see, there's a figure on it, and when I was a child, I was never sure if this was going to be my fate. I knew that I was going to get breasts one day, but did I have to get a beard too? So here's Schiaparelli in her see-through dress. She would have been in her 40s. She took very good care of her body. Her breakfast was a cup of hot water with a slice of lemon, and she made her customers diet to get into her clothes. She believed that you should make your body fit the clothes. And here's my beautiful mother. She didn't actually wear this necklace. I had an artist. This is a Schiaparelli necklace. These are Schiaparelli earrings. But you can see how lovely she was. She would never have worn fake jewelry. Schiaparelli paid incredible attention to detail, and I loved that idea about her. These are some of her buttons. She was called King Button, even though she was a woman. And she made them out of cinnamon, seeds. She always gave work to artists because she wanted to help them, and her best friends were artists. And a lot of artists made these buttons. Some were made by Giacometti, some were made by Cocteau, René Clément. These are some of my favorite ones from her circus collection in 1938. They're acrobats on a circus bolero jacket. And this is her talc. When she came up with Shocking Pink, she asked René Clément, the artist, to make a color that had all the light and birds and fish of the world in it. A color of China and Peru, but not of the West, pure and undiluted. And René Clément tried 8 times to make the color, and on the 8th try, he got the color she saw in her head. It's almost impossible to describe a color so that it communicates to somebody else, but she did it. And I was just crazy about the detail, everything that she had. My mother had the talc. My mother would not have spent $5,000 for a dress, but she had the shocking soaps and the talc and the perfume. And as you can see, the S was gold. Instead of being pierced by an arrow, the heart was pierced by a needle. And the needle has a thread that spells out Schiaparelli, Parfum Paris. And that was the kind of detail she applied to everything. My mother was so beautiful that our house was filled with images of her. This is Mom on porcelain. I often thought that if people came down from Mars and entered our apartment, they would think my mother was the god, because our house was lined with images of her. This is her, an oil painting that got a little decrepit. Here she is. A man stopped her in the park. He was the man who used to do the Time magazine covers, Vuk Vucinic, and he wanted to do her, and he did. And here she is in what I call the lobby pastel, because whenever she went on a vacation with my father, they'd stay at these hotels where there were lobby artists, and the lobby artist would do her, and it would generate business. But Elsa Schiaparelli was not a beauty. Here she is. She was born with a face full of moles on both sides. She was always told by her mother she was ugly. And she felt that way until her uncle, Giovanni Schiaparelli, who was the foremost astronomer in the world at the time, he discovered the canals of Mars, took her to his observatory in Milan and asked her to look through the telescope. And he had it poised right on the Big Dipper. And he said, "That's what's on your face." So, of course, I had to link the moles and see for myself if they really were the Big Dipper. And they came very close. But she had felt so ugly until then that when she was a little girl, she one day planted her face. She got seeds from the gardener, and she pushed seeds up her nose, in her gums, in her ears, in her mouth, everywhere, and she watered her face, and she thought if her face could spring flowers, she would be beautiful. But that night at dinner, she had a hard time eating, and her mother discovered what she had done, and they called the doctor, and he got most of the seeds out. One had lodged in her sinus, which shows you exactly how, adamant she was about this. But I always wondered if there she is with Salvador Dali at Longchamp at the races, and you can see that she, instead of hiding the moles, she had Cartier do a brooch of the Big Dipper that she wore right under the moles, as if to say, "Look at me." And she wasn't afraid to stir it up. Here's the mannequin that she used for the 1938 World Exhibition in Paris. Jean Lavan was running the couture for Paris, not concession, but exhibit. And everyone had to work with a mannequin made out of terracotta that was 7 feet tall and make their close work on it. And Scap she was always called Scap, even by her lovers and her child and her grandchildren. She didn't want to put her clothes on that horrible thing, so she took the mannequin, she laid it out in like a faux plein air with flowers on the bottom, naked, and hung the clothes from a wash line above the model. And it created such a sensation that gendarme had to be called in to make the lines behave, and gentlemen tucked their cards underneath her derriere, and it was the most popular exhibit in the whole entire exposition. I often wondered whether her good friend Duchamp had seen that exhibition. He was in Paris at the time, and I don't know if you've seen his work Étant Donné in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It's a permanent installation. You go into a room, there's only one thing in it, that door, and you can see there are 2 holes. You can see where face oil has rubbed off on it, and if you look through it, this is what you see. A woman just like Schiaparelli's mannequin, naked en plein air. And Jasper Johns called this, it's 3D. He used the hand of Tini Matisse, his last wife. He used the body of a lover. And Jasper Johns, and the skin. It looks just like skin. He tried many, many things, but finally he used a very thin layer of pigskin and painted underneath it and put it over plaster. And Jasper Johns has called it the most unusual work of art in any museum anywhere. And it's worth a trip to Philadelphia to see. This is what it looks like if I just fill in the negative space. Can you see that the figure is at? And if I turn it on its side, I see the letters M and D from Marcel Duchamp. And he was so subversive and so playful that it wouldn't surprise me if he did that on purpose. Can you see the M white, the white M and the black D in it? Good. Her friends were all artists. Here's a wonderful Philip Alsman composite photograph of Picasso and Dali, both of whom adored her. And the Duchess of Windsor liked her too, but she didn't care much for the Duchess. The Duchess got 18 dresses for her trousseau from Schiaparelli, and she thought Schiaparelli collaborated with Dali on this dress. It's got a lobster going down the front, hand-painted. And the Duchess thought it would show the world that she wasn't this ogress, that she had a sense of humor. But Schiaparelli had Dali place it so that the claws were between her legs, and it was an in-joke that only the Duchess didn't get. This is one of her collaborations with Cocteau. Is it a vase or two people kissing or both? And here's Dali did the Venus of the Drawers. Each drawer was to correspond with a different smell that he found on women. And then Schiaparelli did a suit that had drawers for pockets. They actually opened like drawers and had hardware from the hardware store. This is me at her 21 Place Vendôme with a pair of glasses, wearing a pair of glasses Man Ray made for Schiaparelli. And I'm standing in front of a torchiere made by Diego and Alberto Giacometti, the Giacometti brothers. And if you go to Paris, you must go to 21 Place Vendôme and see what's been done to her atelier. It's fabulous. She was a great inventor, and I loved that about her. She had many patents. This one is for eyeglasses, and as you can see, there are no side pieces. They went right over the head. And here she invented the backless dress, and here's the backless bathing suit. She received a patent for it. You can see how amazingly it works. It goes around the waist and ties around the front and stays up. But perhaps her best known or most popular invention was the madcap. Here's Katharine Hepburn wearing it. All it was a tube of jersey sewn closed at one end, and everybody wore it. Everybody wanted it. A man in America, Albert Solomon, named a company Madcaps and sold millions of them. And Schiaparelli got so tired of seeing it that she told her staff, burn it, just burn them. I never want to sell one again. But it didn't work because they're still being sold. And in fact, here's my grandson, my first grandson, coming home from the hospital in a madcap. These are a few of my favorite Schiaparelli things. This is my all-time favorite. It's the bug necklace. The bugs were made by Gene Schlumberger. They were called Scap and Schlum. They collaborated a lot. And he made the bugs very lifelike and put them on a new material called rhodoid that was invisible on the skin. And a woman would go out in a fabulous evening gown with bugs crawling all over her neck. That was Schiaparelli's sense of humor and her nod to surrealism, which kind of was part of all her work. This is another favorite. The surrealists loved butterflies because they transformed. They loved metamorphosis. And the butterflies were drawn by Vertes, and the coat, as you can see, is made of butterfly net. And it was accessorized with a parasol of free-flying butterflies. And this is, Schiaparelli had a quality. This sweater actually changed her life because she had an idea for making it, and she found a woman who could do the Armenian stitch. She had seen somebody wearing a sweater with this very, what she called, steady look. And it turned out it was the Armenian stitch, and she found the knitter, and her name was Arasug Mikalian. And she wound up working with Schiaparelli for 20 or 30 years. And Scap said, if I draw a bow, could you knit me a sweater with the bow in it? And the woman said I could try. And on the fourth try, she got it. And Dolly called this quality, Jean Clement, who made Shocking Pink, he did it for her too. People would just do anything to make their visions happen. And I thought, well, I'm going on tour with this book. I should have this sweater made again. I should have this sweater made. So I went all over New York trying to get it. No one would tackle the Armenian stitch. I finally found someone at Annie's bookstore who said she would do it, but she would not do the Armenian stitch. She would just knit it regularly. Well, and for $8.50. So that didn't make me very happy. So I called the woman who made the kit for the show in Philadelphia, and she said, she said the woman who knit the kit for the show just lost her husband, and she might be looking for a project. Let me call her and see if she'll knit the sweater for you. So she called the woman, and the woman told her, I wouldn't knit that sweater again for Michelle Obama. So I finally found someone through Ravelry, which is the site that knits knitters together in this country, a woman in Austin, Texas, who agreed to do it. And here's the sweater. Up. But I can't wear it. I can't wear it because it's so hot. It's 2 layers. The Armenian stitch is, every stitch is 2 layers deep. So I could wear it if I ever read in Alaska. That's where I'll wear it. But here it is, and I love having it. And
Is it wool?
yes, it's wool. Here's what it looks like inside, so you can see. Do you see? And,
2 strands?
huh?
2 strands?
2 strands, yes, and you drop one, and I really, it's just amazing. Schiaparelli was also, this is Salvador Dali's last wife, Gala, his muse, wearing the Schiaparelli shoe hat, and that just floored me. Very few women wore it. You needed to have a certain kind of, I don't know what the word would be, but to carry that off, you had to have a lot of self-confidence and be immune to the response of people. But I realized if a shoe could be a hat could be a shoe. And that's what Schiaparelli did for me. She made me understand that anything was possible. And thank you.
Q&A.
Yes,
What was the place in Philadelphia that you were telling us to go to?
the PMA, the Philadelphia Museum of Art.
For what?
Go see Dali's, not Dali, Duchamp's Étant Donné.
Okay, say it slow.
Etantsdonnees. And it must be seen. It just must be seen. And you go through this whole room of Dada and Surrealism to get there, so it's a lovely introduction to the room. And it's there permanently because it can't be moved. And in fact, there's a book about it, a book of the instructions of how to reassemble it. Duchamp worked on it for 20 years. It was his last work of art. And when he finished it, he just played chess after that. He had done what he wanted to do. Yes.
A little bit late. Are you talking about your mother and her sister?
No, I'm talking about my mother and Elsa Schiaparelli, the great couture designer.
Oh, your mother was not designer?
No, my mother was my mother.
Oh, but this was about her friend?
No, this book is about how I read a book when I was little, and it kind of liberated me from my mother. It allowed me to look at my mother with some distance and separate. I didn't love my mother less. I just stopped believing everything she said. It was very freeing. And I don't know if anyone in the audience has a transformative book. At the end of the book, there are lists of people and their transformative books. It's fascinating to me how many people respond to Little Women like that. That was their transformative book. Robert Caro's was Horatio Hornblower, and Obama's was Robert Caro's The Power Broker. I love when those things happen. Any other questions?
Transformative book, would it happen very early?
Yes, a transformative book usually happens before puberty. Whenever I asked people when they read their transformative book, it was always 10, 11, and 12. It's fascinating. So a very famous therapist who just died 2 weeks ago, psychoanalyst, lived in my building, Martin Bergman. I don't know if you've heard of him. And I went upstairs and I said, Martin, why is this? Everybody I ask says that they get their transformative book before puberty. And he said, well, you've just answered the question yourself. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, puberty is the time where you've got 1 foot in the family and 1 foot in the larger world. And that is the time that you are ready to separate from the family. And we don't find things until we're ready to find them, you know? It's fascinating. If you take a child to a movie and you think, oh my God, I shouldn't have done this, they won't get it. They're not ready to get it. But the transformative book, has anyone had a transformative book? Yes.
I think it was Little Women. Too.
It was Little Women. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. My sister's was The Good Earth. Elvis Presley's was Siddhartha. Yes.
I know I had mine,
What was yours?
The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
Do you know, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that from a woman. I did hear it from one man. That's fascinating. How old were you?
About 11 and 12.
Uh-huh.
And I decided the brain was a wonderful thing, and I was going to use it.
And look at you. There you go. That's wonderful. It's terrific. That's great. Makes me want to read him again. Yes. Yes, she had the hosiery bag. She had the little thing. Schiaparelli knew that a lot of women couldn't pay $5,000 for a dress. And she dressed everyone from Helen Keller to Marlene Dietrich, and a lot of Hollywood and French people and all the best dressed women of the day. She stole the clients that were going to Chanel, or rather they jumped ship and went to Schiaparelli. But she knew that women couldn't afford $5,000 dresses, but she wanted everyone to have a little something Schiaparelli. And so she had the soaps and the colognes and the talc and the bath sponges that were wonderful, and the perfume. There's a copy of it that doesn't really smell like it. She wanted it to smell like a woman's flesh when the flesh became warm. So it's got bergamot, thyme, flowers. It's got 3 levels of notes. And old bottles, it doesn't seem to lose its power, because I buy the bottles on eBay sometimes. And it smells, it's powerful stuff. A nose in Paris calls it skank, but I wouldn't say that. Yes.
What do you think your mom was so enamored of Schiaparelli, being that she was such a rebel?
Well, and my mom wasn't a rebel, so maybe that allowed her a safe rebellion. No one's ever asked me that, and I have to think about it. But I think, the fact that she wore this saucy perfume, this very sexy, deep scent, added a dimension to her that her crisp, highly tailored, button-to-the-neck things, one played off the other. And I think she understood that. My mother was streamlined and very neat. And but the perfume was another aspect of her. Yes.
Did she influence you to have this Schiaparelli be your transformation?
No, and I never discussed the book with her. She would read at least 3 books a week, and they would wait in the foyer table to be taken back to Womrath's. And I would always look at them. Some I liked. I remember being, well, not loved, but I found The Bad Seed very compelling. But I didn't like The Silent Spring particularly. And some I wouldn't read, but the Schiaparelli book just resonated from the very first page. And it's a wonderful book if you can get your hands on it. Although it got, she never wrote another book, Schiaparelli. It got terrible reviews. I think unfair reviews.
Did she really write it?
I think she did. I mean, the voice is so idiosyncratic. And she was a good writer. She had published a book of poems, erotic poems, when she was very young. And her father sent her to a convent. He couldn't believe she had done it. And here's how she got out of the convent, okay? She went on a hunger strike, and she wouldn't eat. She was a young girl, and her father came and took her home. I loved that about her. That was very appealing to a child.
Thank you for a wonderful talk.
You're welcome.
If anybody has further questions, Patty will be sitting back here. You can purchase a book and have her describe it and ask her anything you like. Thank you very much, everybody.
You're so welcome, Lois.